Imagine waking up every day, walking on eggshell, afraid of the next outburst. For millions of people, this is not just a story, it's their reality. Good day everyone, I am Khaleesa. And as you can see on the slide, I will be presenting about domestic violence. Why did I choose this topic? Because unfortunately, I can relate to this topic so well. Throughout this presentation, we will explore all things connected to domestic violence. So, what is actually domestic violence? It is a pattern in a relationship to gain power or control over an intimate partner. Or to put it simply, one person in a relationship uses aggression to the other so that they can have power or control over them. Today's stereotype usually says that only female are the one who is a domestic violence victim, but that is actually incorrect. Everyone can be domestic violence victim regardless of age, gender, or even race. And fun fact, children who are witnessing domestic violence are also be categorized as domestic violence victim. As you can see on the slide, this is a statistic about domestic violence from 2000 to 2020 in Malaysia. It has a clear increase in the number of domestic violence cases over time. Around 2000 to 2015, it has cases around 2,000 to 4,000 yearly, while in 2022, we can see it increase rapidly, that it almost reached 8,000 cases a year. This suggests that domestic violence has become more reported, maybe because of we have the pandemic related stress, or in 2020 maybe we have a better reporting mechanism. Before I go deeper into this topic, let's learn about form of abuse, because when people talk about abuse, usually what first comes to our mind is physical abuse, but that is actually more than that. First one is obviously physical abuse. Physical abuse is an act of inflicting harm through hitting, slapping, or choking, or other physical aggression. Other than that is emotional abuse. Emotional abuse includes verbal insult like threats or manipulation. The abuser sometimes harm other living things like pets or children in order to make the victim scared of them. For example, dad abuse son so that the mother will follow anything the dad wants. The third one is sexual abuse. It is when one person forcing sexual activity without consent or forcing others into consenting. A lot of people assume that people who are in a relationship can have sexual activity anytime they want, but that is actually not true. Sexual activity in a relationship also needs to have consent from both sides. If only one of them wants it and the other is not willing, it can be considered as rape, even though they are husband and wife. Also, there are economic abuse. It is an act where the abuser are controlling the victim's finance resource. Having identified the different forms of abuse, it is important to look at the root causes. Why does domestic violence occur? The first one is relationship patterns. This includes unsolved conflicts, communication issues, and unhealthy relationship patterns. And people nowadays normalizing violence in a relationship that they don't even realize they are living in a violence relationship. I think this is maybe because they love the people, they love their partner, so that they didn't even realize realize that they are one of the victim. Moreover, there are psychological factors. Usually, domestic violence happens because the abuser has anger management issues, which makes them aggressive and can't handle their stress well, which will lead them to lashing their anger to people around them, like their partner or children. It is also related to cultural beliefs. Women should be under men, or women needs to be submissive to their husband. These kind of phrases can lead to violence and all types of abuse I mentioned before. When there are phrases like this, citizens will truly live this, and it will cause more damage little by little. It can also be in a situation where if the victim wants a divorce, but it will mean leaving shame to the abuser family and to the victim's family. So that's why they didn't file a divorce. And in my opinion, abuser also do what they did because it is a learned behavior from growing up in a family full of violence. What's more is financial strain. Like I mentioned before, this is an act of the abuser controlling the victim's finance resource. Financial instability can also lead to violence in marriage. This is because in marriage, finance is important. No matter if you're rich or not, it is a need. Therefore, it is hard to find a couple that did not fight over the topic money. For instance of how the abuser will strain the victim's finance resource is, the abuser will ask the victim to create a loan under the victim's name. This can create a long-term impact to the victim because the abuser will definitely not take responsibility to pay the loan debt, which will leave the victims with piles of loan debt to be finished. Or worse, they will vanish into thin air because they know the loan is not under their name, and so the government will not be looking for them. Apart from that is power and control. This means that one partner seeks to dominate and subordinate the other. It is also to gain dependency. The abuser did not want to gain dependency from other people. They want the victim to depend on them. They want the victim to be like, oh my god, I can't live without my partner. I don't know how to feed my children without my partner, something like that. But if the victim actually do this to them, they will just not bat an eye to the victim. They just want to know that, oh, I'm in the top and someone is under me. They want to feel that. Here are a few news about domestic violence cases that I found after surfing the internet for hours. Do you know why it took me hours to only find 4 news? Because domestic violence is actually the lowest case reported in Malaysia. And I think that is because many victims are afraid to report their partner because they are afraid of them. And some of the news here are actually reported by neighbor or even the victim's friend. So, the first one is divorce on the rise in Indonesia amid rampant domestic abuse. Do you guys know what this means? No, right? Okay, this means that in Indonesia, there is a lot of divorce happening, but a lot of them are because of domestic violence. Moving on to man arrested for alleged abuse of wife in Kajang, which happened on 19th of November 2022. We also have suspect arrested after choking abusing wife. That one is actually a proof that domestic violence can happen because the abuser can't control their anger. And the last one is, man admits to kicking girlfriend's face, hitting her toddler son with mobile phone until the boy had brain injury. That is very sick and twisted. And next one. Next, we will explore about the impact that domestic violence has on individuals. Number one, it can severely damaging victims' physical and mental health. Physically, the victim will left with injuries like bruises and chronic pain. They can also develop sleep fatigue, whereas mentally, they can sometimes experience anxiety and depression, which will lead them to have difficulties to trust others. Furthermore, we have post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. PTSD is a serious mental health condition that can develop after experiencing or witnessing traumatic event. PTSD makes the victim have uncontrollable thoughts about the traumatic event. They get flashback as if it's happening again, but actually it's not. Other than that, they usually avoid anything that can remind them of the traumatic event, even though it is a small reminder. Other than that, self-harming. There are actually a lot of ways people self-harm, and also a lot of reasons why they self-harm, and it is different from each individual. They act self-harm as coping mechanism so that they didn't think about the trauma and feel relief. It is also like a form of punishment to themselves for feeling guilty, or they even did self-harm as self-blaming themselves that they are being abused. Or in some cases, self-harm happened because as a cry for help. They did self-harm as a cry for help because to show that they are struggling, especially if they are unable to articulate their needs to be saved. And last but not least, as we know, domestic violence happens between an intimate couple. It can actually affect their child as well, which also known as childhood trauma. Children who witness domestic violence tend to show psychological problems from an early age. First, they will start to be avoidance towards people. For example, they would avoid eye contact or conversation with the abuser or other adults, for they are scared that they will be the next victim. They can also become hyper-vigilant. They become hyper-vigilant to threats because they are used to being on guard 24/7, for they are always in a violent household. And children can also develop emotional dysregulation. And through my research, any relationship that have even a hint of domestic violence can cause their children to be neglected or even abused. Before we go into our next agenda, let's spend a few minutes to listen to this short story.
Hello everyone, my name is Khaleesa and I am one of the domestic violence survivors. It all started back in 2004 when my parents got married. There are actually already a sign that my father is violent, but my mother didn't bat an eye. But that guy started to perform all types of abuse towards my mother and then gradually towards me and my siblings. My memory is still fresh when the abuse starts happening to my siblings and I, it was when I was 6 years old. I want to control his emotion, which led him to use violence. It's been going on since 2018, and through the timeline, we cannot manage to seek help from others, but eventually, in 2019, my mother finally had enough and filed a divorce, and they officially split up in 2019. Since then, me and my siblings and my mother lived our life to the fullest, but this event still impacted me mentally. But of course, I always try to distract myself, and I always make myself believe that all of that violence won't happen again. But of course, there are a little bit of things that reminding me of the abuse, which is very hard to forget. But I hope my short story can open the audience eyes that it's very hard to live in a violence situation, and it's not easy to seek help from others. So thank you for listening, and I hope we can spread this awareness and help others who also experiencing this violence. Thank you.
Okay. From that video, we can notice that it is very hard to seek help even though they really wanted to. So let's now explore the ways to prevent domestic violence. These are 4 of the most easiest ways we can do to prevent it. The first one is to know the warning signs. The partner would portray anger through violence. For instance, if our partner would throw things or punch the wall anytime they are mad, this surely portrays that they are a violent person. So I suggest you to run while you can and don't wait until you are one of their punching bags. And the next one is blaming you for the abuse are also signs that yourself might be a domestic violence victim. This action can also be called as playing the victim. Example, after abusing the victim, usually the abuser would say something like, "This happened because you deserve it." They want to make it look like, oh, you really deserve to be abused because of something that you did wrong. While that is a sign that ourselves might be a domestic violence victim, these are signs that the person who we know are living in a domestic violence household. The first one is personality change. If they are usually a bubbly and fun person but suddenly turn into a depressed character, you might want to check up on them. And the next one is excuse for injuries. Victims that got physically affected tend to lie to their friends or family that they caused the injuries themselves to hide that they are actually being abused. Maybe this is because of shame or even love. For example, victims will wear long sleeves in a hot sunny day to not show the bruises to other people. Additionally, we can share information. How can we share information? The first thing that you need to do is to educate yourself on domestic violence topic. Then you can share your resources through social media like TikTok or Instagram. And I think the easiest way that we can do this is just by listen and support anyone who we know is a domestic violence victim. Moreover, we can also promote healthy relationships. How do we do this? It's by acting the right way. We can act the right way by standing up for the victims. Adults also responsible in portraying healthy love life, so that people who watch this can be like, oh, this is the real relationship should be. And the next one is not to forget kids or teenagers usually mirrors their parents' behavior. So that's why parents' role are important, so that they can create their children to behave better and lessen the people who are ignorant and selfish. And finally, we can take time for self-care. This method can be applied on both victim and the abuser. For the victim, self-care can actually help them to recognize and respond better to a bad relationship dynamics. While for the abuser, they can learn healthy coping strategies. Abuser can learn that so that they can manage stress, anger, and any conflict in a healthier manner. It can also increase self-awareness and empathy, which is very crucial to help the relationship become better. Therefore, both of victims and abuser need to take part so that they can avoid domestic violence in their relationship. All in all, since October is a Domestic Violence Awareness Month, let's recognize domestic violence as a serious issue that affects many. We must raise awareness, teach others and ourselves, also support survivors so that we can end the violence cycle and create a healthier communities. That's all.